Hello, everyone. Welcome back to New York Global. On March 20th, that is 2 days from today, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu testified before the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. The hearing was titled as Pakistan After the Elections. And as the name rightly suggests, a number of key issues were discussed and deliberated upon, which included Pakistan's current political landscape, the newly formed government, and the evolving role of Pakistan and the United States relationship, both in the short term as well as in the long term. One issue, one topic that stood far above and beyond everything else were the irregularities that were witnessed and observed during Pakistan's general elections that took place on February 8th, 2024. Speaking of which, Don Lu testified that there were certain incidents both prior to the elections and certain events that happened on the day of the elections that do signal that there may have been a degree of fraudulence involved or a degree of rigging or manipulation. He spoke of the terrorist attacks that targeted members of certain political parties that took place before the elections. He spoke about how press freedom was curbed. He spoke about the fact that certain political parties may have been marginalized and were at a disadvantage more than the others, given that they were stripped of the electoral symbol, which in this case we know of is the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. And he spoke of a lot of things that were witnessed on the day of the elections, including the network disruption that caused not just inconvenience, but led to the questioning of the legitimacy and the way the elections were conducted. Overall, however, he did say that the elections were conducted in a competitive manner, which actually, in my personal point of view, doesn't really give a very nuanced analysis of how things were. Because while irregularities were highlighted in these hearings by both the members of the committee as well as Donald Lu, who was testifying, but at the same time, it was the disclosure was given that the elections happened to have been quite competitive. I'm not certain what that means, but it does seem to signal, at least implicitly, that the elections may not have been as fraudulent as the claims that are being made, or the questions of rigging or alleged rigging that are being raised by both the people of Pakistan and the Pakistani diaspora that is based in the US. The next following minutes, you would see some excerpts from the discussion of the hearing in which these issues are talked about and highlighted.
On February 8th, over 60 million Pakistanis voted in countrywide elections. These elections saw record numbers of women, religious and ethnic minority groups, and young people running for seats in parliament, and resulted in a range of political parties winning seats in national and provincial assemblies. Despite these successes, the United States and international election observers have expressed concerns related to both pre-election and day of election irregularities, including the undue restrictions on freedom of expression, association, and assembly. The U.S. and like-minded countries have also condemned electoral violence, attacks on media workers, and restrictions on access to the internet and telecom services. It is important that any claims of fraud or interference be fully and transparently investigated in accordance with Pakistan's own laws and procedures. And I'm eager to hear from the Assistant Secretary regarding his assessment of that election, if the outcome was credible, and how the election fits into Pakistan's historical context.
When I was a junior officer in Peshawar, Pakistan 31 years ago, I got to see a Pakistani election up close. I got to see the irregularities in that election, but also the courage of the Pakistani people to come out and vote despite threats of intimidation and threats of violence. If you'll allow me today, I propose to say a few words about where the election on February 8th fell short, where we saw positive elements, and what lies ahead for U.S. policy in Pakistan. The day after the elections, the State Department issued a clear statement. We noted undue restrictions on the freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. We condemned the electoral violence and restrictions on human rights and fundamental freedoms. We condemned attacks on media workers and restrictions on the access to the internet and telecom services. And we expressed concern about allegations of interference in the electoral process and stated that claims of interference and fraud should be fully investigated. If you'll allow me, I'll drill down a bit deeper into these observations. We were particularly concerned about electoral abuses and violence that happened in the weeks leading up to the polls. First, there were attacks against police, politicians, and political gatherings by terrorist groups. Second, many journalists, particularly female journalists, were harassed and abused by party supporters. And third, several political leaders were disadvantaged by the inability to register specific candidates and political parties. On the day of elections, an internationally respected local election monitoring organization said they were barred from observing vote tabulation in more than half of the constituencies across the country. And despite a high court order not to interrupt internet service on election day, authorities shut down mobile data services, the principal means by which Pakistanis access social media and messaging apps. There were positive elements to this election as well. Despite the threat of violence, over 60 million Pakistanis voted, including over 21 million women. Voters elected 50% more women to parliament than they had in 2018. In addition to a record number of female candidates, there were also a record number of members of religious and minority groups and young people running for seats in their parliament. Pakistani voters had a choice. A range of political parties won seats in the national and provincial assemblies. 3 different political parties now lead Pakistan's 4 provinces. More than 5,000 independent election observers were in the field. Their organization's conclusion was that the conduct of the election was largely competitive and orderly, while noting some irregularities in the compilation of results. That is correct.
And the department's statement also noted that claims of interference or fraud should be fully investigated. And since that aspect of the statement has gotten a lot of play in the Pakistani press and on social media, could you elaborate on what was intended by that statement?
Representative Phillips, the Pakistani people, through their constitution, have created a system by which the Election Commission of Pakistan hears the complaints of Pakistani people, of candidates and political parties to render judgments about election irregularities. We, as a partner of Pakistan, have called for that to be done transparently and fully, and for those found responsible for irregularities to be held accountable. We can see a process whereby that's happening. The Election Commission of Pakistan has formed a high-level committee which is now sifting through thousands of petitions from people across Pakistan who have complained about the very same things that we have noted in our statement. We will be monitoring that process very closely. We will be encouraging the government and the Election Commission to make sure that that is a fully transparent process with the Pakistani public.
As I am sure you're aware, Pakistan recently conducted the largest election in its history, but these were unfortunately marred by allegations of fraudulent activity and electoral violence. Watchdog groups raised the alarm over reports of political repression, suspension of interest access on election day, delays in election results, and more. Currently, the Election Commission of Pakistan is reviewing many of the election results in individual parliamentary constituencies, and the Pakistani judicial system is investigating and adjudicating irregularities. In fact, the ambassador from Pakistan came to my office yesterday and talked about what they were going to try to do to mitigate these problems. With all this being said, there must be full, credible, and independent audit of these election results. Secretary Liu, do you think and the State Department have confidence in Pakistan's judicial process and its ability to adjudicate claims of wrongdoing?
Thank you, Representative McCormick. If I might, just before I answer that question, just say a word about protests. We have just tremendous respect for the Pakistani American community. We pride ourselves in the State Department and in my office about talking to Pakistani Americans, because they are the people in our vast country who care the most about this relationship. They have something genuine to offer because of their deep knowledge and the deep concern they have of the future of the country. And so I want to join the voices of this committee to say how important their involvement is, how much we respect them. We try to listen to them at every opportunity. I hope they are also listening to all of you and to those of us who are trying to guide this policy.
Absolutely. And I will say, respectful conversation is always paramount for me. I've met with constituencies. I have people who've come here from all over the United States that I've met with in my own district on this topic. There is a time and a place for everyone to speak, and that's order. That's something that we worked hard for.
One of the things that I have faced over these last 2 years is some of these allegations, unfounded allegations, have resulted in regular death threats against me, threats against my family, involvement of local police. There is a line of acceptability, and I do think at times some of the free speech has verged into threats of violence, which is not acceptable in our society. Sir, if I could answer your important question. The Election Commission of Pakistan, in past elections, has rerun elections where there have been a finding of electoral abuse. We have seen that over and over. In fact, in this election, they have already ordered the rerun of elections where there has been violence. As we know, there have been candidates who have been killed in this election. There have been some terrible violence that preceded the election. We call on the Election Commission to fulfill its constitutional role in Pakistan, to be the watchdog over these elections and to act in a nonpartisan way. We all will be watching this process very, very closely. As to whether they will do it, it's up to the Pakistani people to make sure their institutions are functional and that are upholding their constitution.
We then have the vote tabulation system, and they have banned the bat, the symbol of the PTI, then they banned the batsman. And this is, I mean, there have been flaws in other Pakistani elections, but this is perhaps the greatest flaw. And we're told, and the Pakistani ambassadors told me, well, this is just the ordinary working of the Pakistani judicial system. That's the same judicial system that has Dr. Afridi in jail for 14 years for getting bin Laden. Do we have faith that Imran Khan has not been the victim of selective prosecution? Or is it apparent that he has been?
Sir, following the rioting on May 9th, the day Imran Khan was arrested, the United States government has raised our concerns about the mass detention of members of the opposition, to include the PTI. We have raised concerns about the use of military courts.
If I can interrupt, there's one thing you need to do. The American ambassador needs to visit Imran Khan in prison and make sure that he lives to tell the tale of how he was wrongfully imprisoned through selective prosecution. I yield back.
I know we've touched on some of the election issues before, but like many other members of this committee, I'm concerned by the trends, but also concerned by the elections specifically. As we know, in early February, the elections were held after a nearly 3-month delay that raised serious concerns about the democratic process in Pakistan. I also know that the State Department joined other international election observers in expressing concern that the election included undue restrictions on freedoms of expression, association, and assembly. So, you know, I want to reiterate my personal concern. The incoming that I've received has really been illuminating and suggested that there's more that we can do. I could share the chair's urging in his recent remarks that our country uses its levers to ensure that democracy is upheld. That's also why I'm proud to co-sponsor House Resolution 901. This resolution reaffirms the House of Representatives' strong support for democracy in Pakistan and urges the government of Pakistan to uphold democracy and protect fundamental rights. But as we look more broadly at human rights in Pakistan, the State Department, your agency's most recent human rights report, highlighted significant human rights challenges in Pakistan, including restrictions on freedom of expression and freedom of the press. Credible threats of violence, harassment, abductions, and killings by security forces, political parties, and other groups have led citizens and journalists to self-censor their speech for their own safety. The State Department found that the Pakistani government's failure to investigate and prosecute attacks on free speech and the press have effectively led to restrictions on free speech and the press in a very dramatic way. Really what I want to hear is how can and how will the United States work with the Pakistani government to support meaningful change to promote freedom of speech and freedom of the press?
Sir, I have the pleasure and responsibility of reading the Pakistani media on a daily basis. And I will confirm what is in our human rights report is there is both self-censorship and occasionally active censorship in Pakistan today. At the same time, what I read in the Pakistani press is a cacophony of voices. There is actually competition in the media with respect to things that are said and not said, as well as in social media. And so one of the most damaging things that we see today are restrictions on social media because, like the rest of the world, Pakistanis are getting a lot of their news and information through the internet. And so when the internet gets pulled down or X gets throttled as it has been now for several weeks, it denies the Pakistani people from getting the kind of diversity of reporting information that they deserve. We are talking to the Pakistani government at the highest level about these issues. We're also working year after year in the trenches with Pakistani civil society to help to train journalists about fact-checking, about responsible sourcing of their information, about journalistic standards. And what I can also see is, while there is censorship, both self and active, we can also see the development of some truly excellent journalism coming out of Pakistan and some very brave journalists who defy these censors and still produce things that call into question the government or the military or the Americans or any number of other institutions of authority.
So now, as you all have seen, that these clips that we've extrapolated from almost a 1 hour, 30-minute hearing that took place on March 20th, highlight the discussion that was centered and focused around the elections that took place. Now, moving past that, I would like to highlight another key topic that was raised and discussed upon. That is Pakistan's economic future and the role of the United States in helping Pakistan bolster its economic capabilities. Having said so, in this regard, Donald Liu highlighted, and I may find myself endorsing his viewpoint over here, but he did mention that Pakistan needs to improve upon its investment climate. He said that Pakistan, a country which is already grappling with a debt crisis, has been going back and forth with the IMF, negotiating for loans ranging from $1 billion to $3 billion, and is in need for even much more. Can really help its economy by injecting more foreign investment. And he mentioned that a lot of US investors would be willing and would be actually interested in investing in Pakistan, given that Pakistan is able to address some of its structural issues that makes it a better and a more receptive host to foreign investment. These issues include regulatory constraints. These issues include problems and challenges that Pakistan tends to face with law enforcement and security, because all of this come together in making the environment much more conducive, in making it much more enabling for investment to come in and to flourish. It was also highlighted that the US has been the greatest export destination for Pakistan and has been one of its key trading partners. And in the future, Donald Liu does said that the US looks to maintain that tie and rather further make it much more strengthened and to deepen Pakistan's engagement with the US across various economic fields and various economic sectors. now we've also extrapolated certain clips that highlight this course of the discussion from the 1 hour 30-minute duration of the entire hearing.
We are at an inflection point in our relationship with Pakistan. As you suggest, Afghanistan has been in conflict for 40 years, and Pakistan has been a country that has been caught up in that conflict. The end of the war in Afghanistan provides us all an opportunity to have a relationship with Pakistan on its own terms, and we are committed to doing that. One of the major goals that we have with Pakistan now is to support the Pakistani people as they face this terrible threat of terrorism. Many of the members have discussed this, but this is a country where the people have suffered under the threat of terrorism in a way that I think no one on the planet has had to suffer. The attacks, particularly in the provinces of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Baluchistan, over the past 3 years have grown exponentially. We continue to see attacks being launched from Afghan territory. And you saw a major attack on Saturday in which 7 policemen were killed by the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban. And we call on the Afghan Taliban to ensure that its territory is not used as a launching pad for terrorist groups. Second, we're very focused on economic stability for Pakistan. For Pakistan to deal with its social, terrorism, and political issues, it needs a functioning economy. And we want private sector-led growth there. Growth that benefits the Pakistani people, not growth which fuels profits by lender countries like the PRC. And lastly, we have a long partnership, people to people, with Pakistan. We want to see that grow. We want to see business-to-business relations improve. We want to see the ease of Pakistani Americans to travel to Pakistan and Pakistanis to travel to the United States. Those ties are critical. I have 2 children in university right now. We have many, many Pakistani friends as they've grown up, but also in university. We want to see those numbers expand. Thank you.
Thank you. With the remainder of my time, I'd like to talk about economic issues. If you could give an assessment of the current economic situation in Pakistan. Of course, a growing economy is good for stability. It's good for this partnership and trade. I know it's still early, but if you could provide an assessment of how you see things right now, I'd appreciate it.
No, not only is it really important for the Pakistani people that they have economic stability and economic growth, it's important for America. We have lots of investments in Pakistan. There are lots of franchises and American businesses working throughout Pakistan. Their success is our success. One of the issues I think that we face with the Pakistani economy is a real difficulty to invest and to trade there. We are calling on Pakistan to reform many of the ways it does business with foreign partners. And in doing that, they will attract American investment, but they'll also attract investment from the Pakistani private sector. Pakistani investors are smart. They want to work in a place where they can make money. And so some of the things that we're calling for are reform of the regulations that will allow repatriation of profits out of the country, cutting down on bureaucratic red tape, and more predictable regulations. If Pakistan is willing to do that, I think you'll see large numbers of American investors flocking to Pakistan. It's a really interesting place to invest if it had the right conditions.
All right. Thank you, sir. And with that, I yield back.
So moving beyond economy, which can be leveraged as a great avenue for Pakistan to really transform its relationship with the United States and reform and I would say rewrite its relationship that for the longest time was centered around their mutual goal of addressing terrorism globally around the world. And Pakistan, is very well known, was one of the United States' leading ally in its war on terror that were initiated in 2001, and even prior to that was one of United States' closest allies during and after the Cold War. But despite having talked about these issues pertaining to Pakistan's political, social, and economic landscape, One very key and controversial issue, which I may say so, was raised by members of the Senate, and that was regarding the allegations that were made by Pakistan's former Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, on Donald Lu, where he alleged that Donald Lu had warned then Pakistan ambassador to the US, Asad Munir, of uh, of uh, of of toppling Mr. Imran Khan's government. Mr. Imran Khan had claimed that this is where the entire controversy, where the sorry, यार ये part दोबारा करते हैं सारा. So you must have, no, sorry, yeah. So now coming back, beyond Pakistan's political landscape and the Pakistan's economy, a number of other issues were discussed, but there was one very key and controversial issue, which I may say so, was brought to the forefront and was highlighted by members of the committee and the question was put forth to Donald Lu, and that was regarding the allegations that were made by former Prime Minister Mr. Imran Khan against Donald Lu, in which it was alleged that Donald Lu was the central figure which propped and perpetuated the entire movement which led to Mr. Imran Khan's ouster. Mr. Imran Khan and Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf back in 2022 had alleged that a foreign conspiracy was brewing against his government and was brewing to ensure his ouster and to topple his government. And it was initiated by a warning that was communicated by Mr. Donald Lu to then Ambassador of Pakistan to the US, Mr. Asad Munir. Responding to these allegations and responding to these questions that were raised by members of the committee, Donald Lu very outrightly said that there was absolutely no semblance of any truth to these allegations that were made. He said that they were completely fraudulent, they were completely falsified, and they did not bear any truth. I mean, very honestly speaking, this entire issue about foreign conspiracy, the cipher issue, as it is much more commonly known, has been doing the rounds, especially in Pakistan, for quite some time, and is one of the key reasons as to which Mr. Imran Khan has been convicted and is currently serving jail time in Pakistan. Mr. Donald Lu continues to deny that, and I believe there's no way for us to verify whether these claims are right, whether these claims are wrong, but we can only communicate to you and pass it on as to the responses that were made by Mr. Donald Lu, in response to the allegations that were raised. The following few minutes are an excerpt and an extract focusing on Mr. Donald Lu's response to these allegations.
Mr. Secretary, there have been unsubstantiated allegations that the U.S. government has conspired to remove Prime Minister Imran Khan from power. What is your assessment of these untrue speculations?
Mr. Chairman, I want to be very clear on this point. These allegations, this conspiracy theory is a lie. It is a complete falsehood. I have reviewed the press reporting related to this, what's called the cipher in Pakistan, the alleged leak diplomatic cable from the embassy here. It is not accurate. It at no point does it accuse the United States government or me personally of taking steps against Imran Khan. And thirdly, the other person in the meeting, the then ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, has testified to his own government that there was no conspiracy. We respect the sovereignty of Pakistan. We respect the principle that Pakistani people should be the only ones choosing their own leaders through a democratic process. Mr. Chairman, we are grateful that you are holding this hearing today for us to talk about that process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Liu, I appreciate your observations on the recent election, both the positive elements and also the challenges. In the State Department's post-election statement, the indication was the United States is going to work with the next Pakistani government regardless of the party. I just want to clarify that that has always been the case, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the department has also expressed concerns about human rights and democracy in Pakistan where appropriate, but has never taken a position on who should lead an elected government in Pakistan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
As you all may have just seen, one thing that I would like to highlight here is that some supporters of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and Mr. Imran Khan were present in the committee hall at the place where this hearing was taking place. And as Mr. Liu was responding to these allegations, he was heckled, and some disruptive rhetoric was put forth by the supporters based on which they were escorted. There's a sentiment which prevails and exists within the Pakistani diaspora in the US that the US did have a certain role to play in Mr. Imran Khan's ouster and has always been to some degree engaged in influencing implicitly or explicitly the politics of Pakistan. In that essence and in that light, I believe that these hearings may not be a very significant, but it was a needed, much needed first step in addressing the concerns and addressing these points and addressing these valid notions that have been brought forth and that have been put forth related to the rigging allegations in Pakistan. And given that US is a superpower, continues or claims to be one of the biggest proponents of democracy, has a role to play in ensuring the right form of democratic notions to exist and prevail around the world.